Okay, here we go. Sorry about that.
Good evening, everyone. Kodesh Tov again. Parsha Vayikra begins with the word naturally Vayikra, and you will all notice all the Meforshim comment upon it that the word is written with a small aleph, as though it were Vayikor. Vayikor is a happenstance. It's at random. It's the word that's used to describe the relationship of Bilam with heaven, so to speak. So everything that happened to him was a mikra. It happens. It's happening. But it's not that the Lord is calling, so to speak, on it to him. And here it says, Vayikra Moshe. So Moshe certainly would not treat it as something that happens at random, that it's just something accidental that happened. So then why didn't he write it with a big aleph? What does the small aleph come to indicate? And that there are many, many shotim. There are only one or two things I want to share with you this afternoon that are pretty basic regarding how people should regard themselves. One is Vayish Moshe Olav Ma'od Mikol Odom Asher Pnei Adam. Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble of all people. So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to write Vayikra with an aleph, because that is so, it's hubris. God called on me, right? He called me up. Who am I that God should call me up? Nevertheless, God wanted that it shouldn't be Vayikra, that you should think that somehow it happened at random, that and part of it is because of the fact that the Gemara says that in certain respects, Bilam is the equal of Moshe. It says, Welcome to Yisrael to Moshe Od. By the Jewish people, we never had anybody like Moshe. But the Umos Olam come. The nations of the world had such a person who had the potential of being Moshe. Umanu, and who was he? Was Bilam. So therefore, because of that, the Torah insists that he write an aleph here, because we could have pronounced it Yoshem Lemikra, Yoshem Lemasora. We could pronounce it Vayikra even without the aleph. But the Torah insisted that we write it. But Moshe, in his humility, in his modesty, didn't want to write it large, because that would indicate that somehow the Lord, so to speak, has to come out onto him, right? You got to call onto him. So therefore, he wrote it with a small aleph. So the small aleph indicates the modesty of Moshe, while it retains the fact that this is a communication between God and the prophet Moshe, our teacher, the words of holiness, words of eternity. That's what idea. In line with that idea, we read at the end of Parshas Kisisa, months ago already. That Kikoran Pnei Moshe, Moshe's face shone, had a radiance to it. And it shone with such an intensity, Kiyore Lageshes Elof. The people backed away from him. They were afraid to go near him. he was, so to speak, radioactive. And he had these great beams of light that emanated from his countenance. So therefore Moshe had to wear a mask. So that people would come close to it. And that they would not be put off by the radiance that emanated from his features. They would only see Moshe through a mask. A very strange, difficult idea, even for us to imagine how that happened. But it says that whenever Moshe spoke to the Jewish people, he had to wear the mask. And whenever he communicated, so to speak, with heaven, so then he took off the mask. Because the radiance of Moshe's face cannot equal or affect the radiance of heaven. So the Gemara asks, that's a medrash really, Mehechon Koran or Ponov Shel Moshe. Where did he get that radiance? Where did it come from? So the simple explanation which the Medrash advances is that when he was on Sinai and he was accepting the Torah and he was there with the celestial beings, with the angels, etc., so the radiance is contagious. And since he wasn't wearing a mask, so he caught it. And therefore, when he came down, when he descended, his face still shone from the radiance of the angels and what he saw and experienced in heaven, in the other world. And therefore, even when he came back to this world, his face shone. That's one thing the Medrash says. But there's a beautiful piece in the Medrash that ties in with this Vayikra that I discussed with you a few moments ago. And that is that Moshe wrote the Aleph small, miniature Aleph. So Moshe had ink left over in his pen because he didn't write the large Aleph, which would have used up all of the ink. But he wrote the small Aleph. The small Aleph left over ink in his pen. And many times it happens. I mean, we're not accustomed to pens anymore either. And certainly not to fountain pens and ink, etc. I remember Shmini's my bar mitzvah parsha a few years ago. I remember that the gift of choice to the Bochra bar mitzvah was a Parker pen. That was it. Today, no one knows what a Parker pen is either. But anyway, so he had a little ink left in the pen. So the Medrash says that, so to speak, absentmindedly, he ran the pen through his hair, as people often did then. I remember my Rebbeim used to have a pen and dry it off in their hair. And so the Medrash says that drop of ink that was left in the pen that he rubbed his hair with, that gave him the radiance that no one could look at it. That was the source of the Karen Or, of the great beams of light that emanated from his features. So again, it's the modesty of Moshe that creates his greatness. The fact that he had a small Aleph, that's why his face shone. If he would, he would take a full page ad in the paper with a big Aleph, okay. And there's no ink left over. There's no room for this type of radiance. And this is the Medrash here is conveying to us this idea. And it's part of the Parsha of Vayikra, the Chumash of Vayikra, because Vayikra deals with sacrifices. It's the Sefer Torah Kohanim. It's the Sefer Karbonos. So we don't bring sacrifices anymore. But the truth of the matter is that we do bring sacrifices. And we should sacrifice our talents, sacrifice our wealth, sacrifice our honor for the sake of the holiness of the altar. Those sacrifices still remain. And that's Moshe Rabbeinu's sacrifice because of the fact that he wrote with a small olive to indicate the humility and the modesty of the person, which led to the fact that his face had such a radiance and shine that it illuminated the Jewish world for millennia till our day as well. Chananya ben Akash Omer Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu V'Zakos Tzitz Yisrael V'Chizach Hirbo Lahem Torah Mitzvos Shenemar